Good to see you guys. It is time for us to have our Sunday school lesson. If you have a commentary with you, today is October the 15th, and in the commentary, it's over on page 56. We are finishing up our study about Jacob and Joseph. We are still in the same unit of early Jewish history, okay? So we're really looking into the Old Testament. We're really looking into those first chapters of the Old Testament, pretty much seeing, well, from the beginning where the Jewish people came from, all right? Seeing from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and now we've went through the story of Joseph. I love the story of Joseph. The reason why I love the story of Joseph so much is because he went through so much adversity, so much. And any normal person, they'd have just gave up. I don't know about y'all. I would have given up. When I was sitting in that prison in Egypt being accused falsely, right then I'd just been like, you know what, whatever. God, just let me die. Anybody been there with me before? God, why? Why am I here? What purpose am I serving? Because remember, he wasn't in that prison for a week or two. He was in that prison for years. So before we jump into this, we do need to go ahead and pray. That is the most important thing. Let me tell you, you got to have a prayer life. You got to be talking to God. You got to make sure that relationship is kept open, all right? Because if that relationship isn't open, how are you going to talk to him? How is he going to talk to you? Good morning, sis. All right. Now, today is Old Fashioned Sunday, so if you look out there and you're like, that woman's wearing the weirdest outfit I've ever seen, well, that's because I am trying to be old fashioned, and I started out as school marm this morning, and here we are. So there you go. And if it doesn't look like that, just make it up in your head what you think it looks like. Just don't tell me, it could hurt my feelings. All right, so I am going to ask Sister Christina, would you mind praying over our lesson this morning? But wait, I'm going to ask your old man Dayton there if he'll take up the offering this morning. Make sure you got your cane, don't you? Don't you leave your cane. You got to use that. Amen. Now, you got to understand, historically speaking, factually speaking, looking at the land at the time, you have to understand that the Jewish people, they were going through some serious times as far as the famine was concerned, as far as trying to take care of their family was concerned. They had a lot they were dealing with, okay? But God stepped in to take care of his people. God will always take care of his people. And what I was saying about the story of Joseph is the fact that Joseph, you got a boy that the brothers hated him. He got threw in a pit. They tore up his coat. The daddy thought he was dead. They sold him into slavery after they finally decided not to kill him. In slavery, he was falsely accused. He was thrown into prison, and they forgot him in prison until years on down the road. So this all started when he was a kid. He was like 17. You know, he's a teenager. And by the time he was working in Egypt, you're talking about a dude that's in his 40s now. And just with one little switch, God set up the victory. It may take more than a couple days. It may take more than a year. You might wonder if it's ever going to happen. But let me tell you, as long as you're following God and you're drawing breath, it's going to happen. It doesn't matter how long it feels like it takes. We are human beings. We are an emotional group that we get down, don't we? Oh, woe is me. That's what we do naturally, is it not? So we need to understand when God's on our side, it's going to work out. That whole verse, do you know that verse that says that everything works out how? To what? For the good to whom? Just to anybody. Thank you. It's the people who love the Lord. When people set their life to do what God wants them to do, God's going to make sure that they're taken care of. Will you have dark times? Absolutely. Will you feel down and out? Most likely. As long as we're human beings, we're going to have all these feelings. I bet you Joseph felt the same way a whole lot of times. He probably felt some fear when they first pulled him up in front of the king to interpret a dream. Because if he messed up, what was the king likely to do? Everybody say kill him. Okay, 3 people said it. So everybody, let's say kill him. Yeah, the king could kill him in a heartbeat. As a matter of fact, that's what he did with a lot of his servants when he'd get mad. So today, Joseph is leading pretty much all of Egypt. He's everything except the Pharaoh. Okay? So you've got this guy who came out of prison, and all of a sudden, he has been raised up. Did God use the bad to work out for his good? If Joseph had given up in that prison, would he have been one of the highest leaders in all of Egypt? Now, why do you think God found it important to bring the Jewish people into Egypt? Think about the time. We just came out of this massive famine. Remember the 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty? Last week's lesson, Joseph started reuniting with his brothers, and he set it up in that cool, tricky way to get them all there because they didn't know him, and then he finally revealed himself to them. Y'all remember that? I hope you did. I might have been on a vacation, but I was here through a lens, still getting to watch and listen, because I love the story. When it comes to a family being reunified, oh, I love it, because you got so many families and so many stubborn people out there today. They'll go for years and they won't speak to somebody. I ain't talked to them in 6 years. Well, why not? Well, you should have seen how they acted at Mama's funeral. Are you kidding me? Get over yourself. You don't have enough time to go around here holding grudges. We don't know when tomorrow is going to be snatched. I've seen great big graves. I've seen wee little bitty graves. There is no respecter of person based on age. We need to understand that. And that's why it's so mightily important for us to get this word out and let people understand it. So Joseph reunited with his brothers. He brought in his family. He brought in pretty much all of the Jews at that time, did he not? So here he brings in all of these Jewish people into Egypt. Because what did Egypt have? Egypt had food. Egypt had plenty. Egypt had plenty because God had Joseph there instructing him what to do, and the boy listened. So it was set up for the Jewish people. They were definitely going to be a survivor at the cost of the Egyptians. The Egyptians had the land. The Jewish people had the promise. Did they not? And God's promise, it's going to happen. God's promise is going to happen. It's that simple. His word does not return void. His promise will happen. Look with me now. All that was totally free and part, that was the build-up, okay? I'm sorry, but when I miss a week, I get all excited about the Sunday school lesson, and I like to go back and look at what we didn't get to talk about. Did anybody have any comments about the build-up up till now? Because today we're coming to the end of it. Today, the title of our lesson is Jacob and Joseph Die Well. We're going to be looking at Jacob's final words in Genesis 49. We're going to be looking at Jacob's burial in Genesis 50. And then the third part, Joseph reassures his brothers, and that's also in Genesis 50. Our central truth today, God enables his children to finish life well. He does. Our focus, consider what it looks like for God's people to die well and pray for power to finish well. And then our evangelism emphasis, a Christian who dies well testifies to God's power and faithfulness. And then our golden text today comes out of 2 Timothy 4. It's 2 verses, it's 6 and 7, and it says, "For I, Paul, am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith." Oh, I pray that I can say that at the end of time. And you know what? I was just thinking about yesterday. We traveled about 14 hours on interstates with a lot of people who really don't know how to drive. And it was awful. We left close to Miami, Florida yesterday morning about 8:30. And we drove, and we finally got home and in bed last night about 12:30. Now, it would have been quicker, but we had to stop and get some food and stuff. You know, you got to do what you got to do. I need my taters, so I went and got some extras. When I see one person signing up to bring mashed potatoes, I'm like, I'm bringing them too. And then I called somebody else, Sister Kim. I was like, Kim, we need taters. If you look at my plate, guess what you're going to see a whole lot of? Taters. I am... with this red hair, I'm Scottish and Irish and all like that. We like them taters, right? Anyhow, so we have Jacob's final words. Let's go over to Genesis 49 with me. We're going to look at verse number 28. It says, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel. Who were those 12 tribes? Jacob's who? Jacob's who? His sons, okay? And of course, he has trained them like disciples, has he not? Yeah, he had to train them. Think about it. They took it very seriously on training the next generation. We should take it just as seriously. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it that their father spake unto them, and blessed them. Everyone according to his blessing he blessed them. And he charged them and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. That means, hey, I'm about to die. I'm about to go on up and let that family circle be joined up a little bit more. My time's coming. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite for a possession of a burying place. If you recall, Abraham specifically bought this area pretty much to bury his family in. He bought his own little graveyard, so to say. All right? When Sarah died, he wanted to make sure she was buried correctly, and he bought this land so nobody could mess with it, and she could be buried there. Well, here we have Jacob. Who is Jacob to Abraham? Think. I've got Abraham, I've got Isaac, and I've got Jacob. He's the grandson. Jacob is Abraham's grandson. Okay? So here we have Jacob, and Jacob now has his 12 boys. Remember, Jacob married Leah, he married Rachel. There's a few more thrown in there, and he had all of these kids, right? But he had 12 boys, and those 12 boys grew to become leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. If you recall, at this time, Jacob didn't go by the name Jacob. What name did Jacob go by at this point? It was Israel. Jacob became Israel. You remember that promise that God gave Abraham. He said that his offspring would be how many? Just as many as the stars. He would have as many offspring as there were stars in the sky. I don't know if you've looked lately. There's a bunch of them. All right? And so Israel, Jacob becomes Israel, and we recognize Israel today as an entire country because, let me tell you, there's enough of that offspring, as many as the stars in the sky. There's a bunch of them. All right? So when we look, Jacob is like, listen, I'm in Egypt. This is not my promised land. Don't you know Abraham told him all about the promised land? Abraham taught him thoroughly. Think about your grandkids. If you get around your grandkids, you're going to teach them something. You try to teach your kids, sometimes you don't think it takes too well, but you know what? They take more than what you realize. So don't let the opportunity pass. You don't have to fuss and gripe and moan and beat them in the head. As a matter of fact, you could actually just live the lifestyle in front of them, and they'll pick up your habits, good or bad. So we need to watch ourselves. We need to make sure that that example is being set correctly for our next generation and train them accordingly. And like I said, you don't have to train with just words. Train with your everyday action. My daughter, before she goes to bed at night, she makes sure to read the Bible. She makes sure to pray. You know why she does that? Because every day as she grew up, guess what my family did before we went to bed at night? We read the Bible and we prayed. The training took. She still does it. She's more adamant about it even than I am. I'm proud of her for that too. It took. That relationship with God, it took. If she hadn't seen me having a relationship with God, do you think she would have wanted to keep up with a relationship with God? I have a lot of people, they'll be like, I send my kid to church. Oh, so-and-so, they take them over to their church all the time. Well, if you never darken the church door, are you showing importance of going to church to your child if you just send them? Must not be too important if you don't go. And then how are you going to have anything to say to that child when they look, they're about 14 or 15, they're like, I'm tired, I don't want to go. We have to lead by example. So, here we have Jacob, who is now Israel. He's talking to his sons. He's like, listen, your papa bought this area close to our promised land. I don't want to be buried in Egypt. This is not my people. This is not where I belong. Right here is not where I belong. I'm just visiting. Now, I don't know how long I'm going to visit. I might be visiting up to 100 years. I might be visiting until tomorrow. I might not visit past today. I don't know when it's time for me to go home. I don't know when it's time for you to go home. I've seen people on the verge of death, waiting, just knowing that that next breath is going to be their last one. And they're up right now, walking around doing just fine, cooking, attending church, doing whatever they please. I've seen people that they were healthy as a horse. And they get up and they go to one thing and practice one time. Go to football practice one time and drop dead at the age of 12. Guys, we don't know when. That's the important thing to remember. We don't know when. We know it'll happen. We know it'll happen. Now, I was thinking about that yesterday. And I started thinking about, I was studying a lesson on the ride. I wasn't driving. Don't worry about that. But I was studying, had some good time to myself just to think and go through this. And I like to imagine. I like to get inside. I call it the mind's eye. I like to get in my mind's eye. I want to see it for myself. I imagine walking into Egypt. I imagine what the dirt was like. What did it sound like as I would step on the ground? I want to know these things. What did it look like when I was ready to go get the food for my family? Was there like a certain method? Did they hand me a piece of papyrus and a quill and say, please write out your order form? Or did they look at me and say, just get in that line over there, you can have those scraps because you don't look like these Egyptians? Who knows? I want to see what Joseph looked like as he was dressed up as an Egyptian. He wasn't an Egyptian. He was a Hebrew. He was a Jew. But guess what? Every single day as a leader in Egypt, guess what he looked like? He looked like an Egyptian. I bet he even walked like an Egyptian. But he did everything like an Egyptian, but he wasn't an Egyptian. And Jacob's like, listen, I'm not an Egyptian. Don't bury me here. And Joseph, well, let's just go on and let's read Genesis 50. Israel has now passed away. Jacob died. Verse number 1. And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. And the physicians embalmed Israel. Now, my question for you, do you think the Hebrews knew how to embalm someone? Even today in the field of archaeology, these historical people going in here and digging stuff up, where do they say a great deal of technology existed at that time? In Egypt. They had advanced medicines. They had advanced training. They had just advancements right and left over in Egypt. Why? I have no idea. A lot of people say it's aliens. I say it's because God wanted his people to survive, and the Jewish people needed a place to go eat. There wasn't a Walmart at that time, so he took advantage of Egypt, and he built it up. And that's where Joseph was able to look at them and say, listen, I want you to take my daddy and you embalm him. Because they had the technology and the ability to do it. Verse number 3, and 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. They had set days, set numbers that they were to abide by when it came to mourning someone, the loss of someone, when it came to purification, when it came to sanctification. They had set numbers. And in this particular, it was 40 days. Well, I don't know about you, but if someone has passed away, I do not want to see them 40 days later if they have not been tended to correctly. Because I'll go ahead and tell you, it's not going to be pretty. But they had the ability to embalm him. I mean, they could have mummified him, but they didn't. They embalmed him. You see, the Jewish people didn't become totally wrapped like a mummy. They had a different method, okay? Yes, were there things in it? You do realize that swaddling clothes are also clothes for the dead, right? And when Jesus was born in a manger, what did they wrap him in? They wrapped him in the swaddling clothes, and they laid him in that manger to keep him warm. That is a sign to us that Jesus was born to die for our sins. That represents that, okay? But in this situation, Israel's like, he's dead. Joseph has mourned. And because Joseph was so important, this Hebrew boy was raised up in Egypt as such a leader, everybody loved him. Look at verse number 3 again. It says at the bottom of it, the second part, and the Egyptians did what? Mourned for him. If Joseph was sad, they were sad. Have you ever loved somebody to the point that if they get sad, you get sad? You can only have that kind of love when you understand God. You can only experience that kind of empathy and sympathy when God's in a relationship with you. He is the only one that can teach you that. By the way, ladies, this Tuesday night is our ladies' ministry right here in the fellowship hall at 6 o'clock. I encourage you and invite you to come because we're going to be looking a great deal at that right there, the empathy and the sympathy. I watched last Wednesday night and I heard the wonderful fruit of the Spirit being explained, and they were talking about kindness, and I was like, oh my goodness. And God just started talking to me. He's like, need to talk to these females. You need to help, because you know what? We are one huge key factor at home, are we not? We take care of a whole lot of stuff. There are a lot of females that feel so underappreciated out there, and they don't need to. We need to realize that empathy and that sympathy and why it is that we are the way we are. This Tuesday night, girls, if you can be here, be here. Guys, if you want to come on. I don't care. That'd be fine. Dayton, if you show up, I'll have a Mountain Dew. But if you want to show up, it's fine. It's a Bible study. It's just that we like to focus on the female side. And you know what, guys? Might help you to hear it be focused on the female side, so maybe you can understand that crazy woman a little bit better. Because we can come across pretty crazy, can't we, girls? If you don't believe that, just hang around for a day. You'll find out really fast. All right? So I encourage you, I invite you this Tuesday night from 6 to 7 in the fellowship hall. Now, back to Israel. They've gone through the morning. Let's look at this little snippet titled Anticipating Life in Heaven. In 2 Timothy 4, Paul realizes he has come to the end of his life. He is confident he has remained steadfast to the call of God. Therefore, Paul does not despair as death draws near, but rather eagerly awaits the blessed hope of eternal life. The end of his earthly life meant receiving a heavenly reward. Now, as I was telling y'all on the ride back, I was just riding. I didn't drive any on the way back, because all these crazy people, boy, there's everywhere. It was so bad that at one point traffic was stopped. Even the cops couldn't get through, with lights blaring and flashing and sirens going, and people just clogged up both lanes, just like, well, good luck. And I'm thinking, you know, those lights mean something. Y'all need to try to get out the way. But people just get out there, they just get crazy. And I started thinking, well, if it happens on the way home, because that's a long trip. And you're barreling down the road at 70, 75 miles an hour. I barely walk 0.7 miles an hour, nevertheless going that fast. And that large of a vehicle with all of that metal and stuff around you, no wonder people die in car accidents so much. And I started thinking about that, and I thought, man, I could go at any second. And I started analyzing, and I thought, well, what if I did? What if I did? Would God be happy with me? Would he say, well done, good and faithful servant? And I started looking back. And yeah, we say, oh, don't look back, don't dwell on your past. But you know what? If you're dwelling on a past that you've done everything that you can do to serve God, I don't see a problem in looking back at that. And I came to the realization that, you know what? I'm good. If God took me right now, I'm good. I have confidence in knowing where I'm going. And with that, death doesn't scare me anymore. You know, you go through a life that you get afraid to die. You think about it and you're like, oh man, I don't want to die. I'm to the point now, it's not that I want to die. I'm just not afraid of it anymore. I'll get to see Israel. I'll get to see Joseph. I'll get to see my parents. I'll get to see all those who went before, and I'll get to rejoice forever. My happiest time I have right now is when I'm praising Jesus. Could you think about that for eternity? How wonderful will that be? We have no need to be afraid of death. When it is time for death to take place, that's just transferring me. That's the elevator I need to get to the top floor. And we need to look at it in a whole new relationship. Jesus is right there. He's not going to leave you alone and let you be afraid. Develop that relationship with him. Because the more you develop that relationship, the less fear comes in to try to control. The better of an understanding you can grasp on the why, God. Why is this, Lord? Oh, I got one that I am going to ask him about when I get there. How many people understand it when I say, God, why does it happen in threes? Anybody understand that? Yeah, but do you know what I'm talking about? Why is it in threes? Have you ever noticed that a lot of times when somebody close dies, it seems like there'll be three people that you know that will pass away? It's like weird. Another thing I'm going to ask, why the certain dates? For example, why is it that, which I think is funny, I'm sorry, but I look at things a little different. Why is it that people die on certain people's birthdays? Have you ever noticed that? It's kind of weird. And it's usually family members. My mother passed away on my father-in-law's birthday. My grandfather passed away on my husband's birthday. My uncle passed away on my grandfather's birthday. Or, I'm sorry, my husband's birthday. I mean, it's just weird how these things happen. My dad passed away on my first cousin's birthday. It's just weird. My grandfather passed away on my dad's dad passed away on my dad's birthday. Have y'all ever noticed stuff like that? Maybe these things just really hit me weird. It could be because I just really like numbers and Leah thinks I have autism. But I look at things like that. And I just want to look at God and say, hey, I got some questions I want answered. There's no reason to be afraid if you have that relationship where you can talk to him every day. I get in a situation, I talk to God about it. It doesn't matter how big or little either. It doesn't have to be something enormous for me to talk to God about it. You know what? I went snorkeling this past week. We took a little vacation. We got out in the ocean. I saw these fish. It was so cool. I can't really swim. I'll just be honest with you. All right? But boy, you slap a mask on my face and I'm ready to go. That just fixes everything. And I go just as far out and I see things like stingrays and all these fish and I just thank God because they're beautiful. And just so happened I got next to this bunch of big old rocks and they had like these coral reef things growing off of it. And there were hundreds of these fish. And the more I'd go out, the bigger the fish got. And Jimmy would be like, let's go back toward shore just a little bit. And I'm like, there's a bigger one. I'll be right there. It's great until you accidentally look too far down and you dip your little snorkel thingy under the water. That kind of freaked me out a little bit, but that's okay. I lived, and then once I regained my composure, I thank God for letting me see that because those were beautiful. I saw them all the way down to this big, and then the biggest one I saw swam by me. He was about yay big, about that big around. I don't know what he was. He wasn't a shark, so I was good. All right, but he had this yellow stripe across the top. He was just so pretty, and I was like, man. Found a hermit crab. He really didn't like for us to touch him. I mean, and even if it's a little bitty thing, I thank God for it because he let me see that. I grew up in the sticks of Parrottsville, Tennessee, where I would have to climb underneath the feed mill because it had a hole in the floor, and it was my job to crawl underneath the foundation where that hole let feed fall underneath, and I'd take a bucket, and I'd scoop that feed up for free to go feed the chickens because I was the smallest one in the family. I was the one that could fit through the little space. All right, it was me and the crawl space, the hole with feeding the rats, and I didn't catch them, thank God, but I'd go in there and I'd get the feed. But this past week, I got to be on the British Virgin Islands over in a place called Tortola to where I could go snorkeling and see some of the most beautiful fish. Don't tell me God can't do whatever he says He will do. He will bless you. He will touch you. He will help you. I don't care where you came from. I only care where you're going to. I had an absolutely marvelous time talking about church stuff, planning out stuff. Boy, you wait. You people, you have no idea what's about to hit. We planned for 7 days straight. It was great. Those poor old servers probably wondered if we were just insane the way. The last morning. Yesterday morning, we did take one last free breakfast. We were over there. This little fella from the Philippines comes over. He's got the Danishes. He walks up right as we have joined to pray. It was precious because he stopped for a second. Jimmy looks up and he goes, sorry, but we're about to pray. He immediately walked around and put his hands out too. And as he left, he goes, I love this family. And we looked at him and we said, we're going to be praying for you too. You know, God will use you no matter where you are if you will let Him. People out there need Jesus. People in here need Jesus. If we don't show them Jesus, I don't think the devil's going to make a way for them to see Jesus, do you? And Jacob, Israel, says, don't bury me in Egypt. You put me where I belong. I don't belong here. I have a home that I belong to. I don't belong here. Genesis 50, verse number 4. And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, if now I have found grace in your eyes, speak. Okay, that's a whole lot of reading. I'm just going to tell you. So Joseph, he is high on the old totem pole by now. He is just below Pharaoh. He could walk right up and have a conversation with Pharaoh at the time. And that's what he did. He's like, listen, Pharaoh, if you don't mind, I want to take my daddy. I want to take his body. I want to take my family and let us go and bury him in our homeland. But I promise you, I will come back. And he and the Pharaoh had such a relationship. You know what the Pharaoh said? He said, go on. Now, the Pharaoh could have said, oh, no, you belong here. You can't go. And that would have been law. But he didn't say that. Because of that relationship, he said, go. Take your family, bury your father where he needs to be buried. And he released him. But you know what Joseph did? To show how he would hold true to the word, he left some of the youngest children, some of their livestock, their belongings. He left all of it in Egypt. He didn't pack up because, you know, they were nomadic. They were used to pack up a tent mile. We hitting it down the road a few hundred miles, right? Get your sandals. They would do that in a heartbeat. But to show they weren't about to be that way, Joseph left all these things. So Pharaoh knew he had some comfort. It's okay to leave a little bit of evidence to comfort somebody, people. You don't have to come and say, listen, I said it, you should believe me. You know, sometimes people like to have a little bit of confirmation. God confirms His word. If God can confirm His word, what's wrong with us confirming a little bit for somebody to give them some ease, to give them some comfort? Verse number 12. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for a possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren and all that went up with him to bury his father after he had buried his father. Do you know that the Egyptians loved Joseph so much that they went with him? They went with him almost all the way to bury his dad. The Egyptians didn't have dealings with Israel. They had dealings with Joseph, but that was Joseph's daddy. And if he loved his daddy, they loved his daddy. And if he wanted to mourn and go bury his daddy, they were going to mourn and they were going to go with him to bury his daddy. But when it came to the promised land, when he got to the border of the homeland, the promised land, the land of Canaan, when he got to that area, he looked at the Egyptians and he's like, you have to stop. The promised land wasn't for Egyptians. Who was it for? Who was the promised land for? For who? For God's people. Who are God's chosen people? The Jews, not Egyptians. And when God says only this is supposed to take place here, then guess what? Only this is supposed to take place here. When God says this is the example, this is the expectation, this is the requirement, this is what the Word says, do what the Word says, and you'll be blessed. It's pretty simple. Do what the Word says, and you'll be blessed. It's not always easy, because as long as the devil's out there and he can control anybody, he's going to make your life as rough as he can do. But the promises that God has given you, they're going to happen. You do realize that the promises that God has given you, they may not happen here on this earth. Do we realize that? Think about that for a second. Do you realize the promises that God has made to you? You may not see it on this earth. Your kids may see it. Did God promise David the temple? Did he promise David that a temple was going to be built? Yeah, absolutely. Did David see the temple? Nope. As a matter of fact, David helped gather stuff for the temple even, but he never saw it. Who saw the temple? Solomon, his what? His son. God gives promises to you that you may never see here, but let me tell you something, you'll still see them. I believe that when we are in heaven, all the good we see and we know it. We won't know anything bad. We won't know anything negative. We're not going to, it's heaven. You can't call it heaven if you're going to have anything that isn't absolutely wonderful, okay? It wouldn't be heaven then. But even if I died today, I know I'd be in heaven. And I've told God, you know, God, I would like to at least live long enough to see a grandchild. Because my daughter's now married. But at the same time, she's like, I ain't having no babies no time soon. And I'm like, that's good. I'm going to take your time. It's okay to take your time. It's okay to enjoy your spouse. Me and Jimmy, we enjoyed ourselves for a good 3 years or so before we had Leah. Because after we had Leah, dear Lord, it's like we didn't exist until she finally went to college. And then we looked at each other and we were like, who are you? Have we met? You want to go eat or something? It felt like we'd started dating all over again. You have different times of life, right? And we need to realize God has different times for certain things. This was Jacob's time, Israel's time to die, but the Egyptians weren't allowed to touch that promised land. That was for the Jewish people. So Joseph and his brothers took their daddy in and they buried him, and then they came back. I love this little thing. It's titled Fathering is a Marathon. This is just too cute. I like to compare the job of a father to that of a long-distance runner. Fathering is a marathon, a long and often trying journey, and we must be disciplined if we hope to finish successfully. That was written by Ken Canfield. And I thought about that. Fathering is a marathon because you got to keep on and keep on and keep. How about them long hours at work? How about them long days that you have work? How about those years that add up and you think you're never going to retire? How about getting those kids fed? Where's the next check going to come in to take care of some shoes or some clothes? Do they grow overnight, every single night where nothing fits again? Fathering is like a marathon. And then I started thinking about mothering. Mothering is like 5 million sprints. Because you got to hurry and take care of that and get over here and take care of this. Well, where is that breakfast? Well, go help them get their bag together. Well, where did you put your backpack? Go get your shoes on. Have you even brushed your teeth? Look at your hair. You're not going out of this house looking like that. Where did you put the pants that I just finished yesterday cleaning them? It's like sprints constantly just going. Eli forgets his lunch. Thank God his aunt's in that classroom to send text messages to the mama going, where's your kid's lunch? That would be me. Charlotte, you forgot to feed one today. All right. That's why I only had one. It was the only one I had to feed. If there had been multiples, I don't know if they'd have made it. Anyhow, so then we go on. Now remember, Daddy was the holding force for Joseph, okay? He was a daddy's boy. Remember that coat of many colors? He was Daddy's boy. And now Daddy's gone. Look at Genesis 50, verse 15. And when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. Guess where they were hanging on to in their heads? The past. Oh my goodness, look at all these stuff. We tried to kill him. We threw him in a hole. We sold him into slavery. They were just a little bit mean to him. Yeah. And they're like, Daddy's gone, and Daddy was the protector. Now that Daddy's gone, old Joe's going to come after us. He's going to remember every bit. And he, being such a high leader in Egypt, he's going to command somebody to come and flog us, scourge us, boil us, or kill us in some way. You wait. I bet you anything, he brings it back to us. He's going to come back for revenge. Have we ever thought about that? Oh, Lord, so-and-so got promoted. Now they're in charge. They're going to make my life awful. I mean, we think these things, do we not? Well, look, it's always happened. In verse number 16, they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph went when they spake unto him. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we be thy servants. So they didn't even go to him themselves at first. They sent somebody to say, hey, listen, your dad, before he died, he actually said for you to forgive all your brothers of all that bad stuff they did. You remember that whole thing, throwing you in a hole? Yeah. Your daddy said that you needed to forgive them for selling you as a slave. Daddy said it. Because they knew that Joseph, that was Daddy's boy. And then the brothers went in, and what did they do? Everyone bowed down. Now, let's rewind. Let's talk about those dreams. Oh, dreamer Joseph. You remember dreamer Joseph when he went into the field because he was too precious to have to work? He wore his precious coat of many colors out there. His brothers were jealous, and what did he do? Hey, guys, I had a dream. I dreamed that every one of you all bowed down to me. And that's when they were like, we're going to kill you. You are a punk. Why are you coming out here in your precious coat that Daddy made for you because you're his darling? Look at you. You ain't even got a piece of tan anywhere. You're pale as a ghost because you never come outside to work. And they kind of hated him. But now look where they are. That very dream that he had when he was just a teenager is now coming to fruition. I bet you at this point he's probably somewhere in his 60s or 70s. He's probably getting to be an older man. You see, those promises, they may not happen overnight. It may be years down the road. But you still got your promises. Hang on to them. As long as you're breathing, you still got them. And after you're breathing, it's going to pass to your children. It's going to pass to your family. It's going to pass. And when I say your children, I'm not talking necessarily about blood children. I look back here on the back row and I see James. When I see James, James is not blood family to me. But at the same time, is he one of my children that I am training right here, right now? Absolutely. I may never see what comes of James, He might grow up and become an evangelist, or he might come up and become some great musician, and he don't even know it yet. You never can tell. But God has a call. God has a reason. God has a purpose. I might die today and never see it. But that doesn't mean his promise disappears. Do you see what I'm saying? And if he'll hang on to these words that I'm saying through God's guidance, I still consider him my child that I'm training. And it has nothing to do with age either, people. I consider Sammy one of my kids that I'm training too. When you're in a role that you are to set an example, you're training everybody that sees you. It doesn't matter the age. They can be older than you. They could be younger than you. I consider Mary Shelton one of my children that I'm training. Take ownership of your training. Joseph looks at his brothers and he's like, guys, you don't need to worry. I love you. I'm not. That can only be done through God. Okay? If it had been one of us, we'd probably said, yeah, I remember that hole is kind of dark. Let's see if you guys like it. Somebody bring the bulldozer. I need a hole. I need a hole to be about 10 feet deep. Make it dark, muddy at the bottom, please. And make the muddy part with some blood mixed in. I want it to stink. And let them sit down there for a few days. If y'all don't mind, just throw them on down. But, yep, I want their best stuff. I'm going to destroy it. All right? That's the human side. He wasn't that way. He had that relationship with God. And you know what? Joseph followed the example of his father. When it's time for him to die, he told them in verse 24 of Genesis 50, Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land into the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. He went back and called up a promise. You can go back and call up a promise. God gave me a promise of my family. I claim it. Do I still have some family members out there that live like heathens? Well, yeah, we all do, don't we? But I claim every one of them. And I claim them because God promised them to me. Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. He's like, listen, I don't care how long it takes. I don't care. Have me embalmed. Put me in. You realize this is one of the first coffins ever created was for Joseph. That's where we even get in a funeral to have a coffin, all the way back to him. Verse 26, Joseph died being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And he told them plainly, don't you leave me here. Now, do you know that in Egypt, the Jewish people, Joseph's family, they were so blessed. They had so many offspring. Now remember, they were in control in our studies. Did the Israelites stay in control with Egypt? No. As a matter of fact, the devil got in the works. What God meant for good to make his people survive. These people replenished. They multiplied greatly. There were millions of them in Egypt till finally Pharaoh's men are like, hey, boss, you better look around. If they decide to take over, they could kill us easily. I bet there's 5 to 10 of them for every one of us. They could easily take over. You need to be careful. And that's when the tide started shifting against the Jewish people, and the Hebrews were put into slavery. Oh, fear will absolutely make people do some of the stupidest things, and it can be a very catastrophic thing. Would you mind doing this for me, please? Thank you, ma'am. Do not let fear control. Fear has no place. Fear has no place in our lives when we're Christians. There was one time on this little vacation, for whatever reason, they can't figure out what the deal is with my heart. I just think it's high strung like the rest of me. But it likes to beat really, really fast. So they've had to start medicines to try to slow it down, and they can't find out what the problem is. And then they want to go and say, well, we can't diagnose it yet because it hasn't been long enough, but we really believe it's this long-term COVID stuff that's affecting your heart and making it act all these crazy ways and making it to where you can't breathe just right and all like that. And I'm like, well, that's fine. If it kills me, all I do is get to go to heaven. But there was a time, even on this vacation, me and Jimmy, we're going up and down steps on this cruise ship. Because Jimmy just loves to exercise. I do not. You can tell I'm looking. But he's like, let's take the steps. And I'm like, dear Lord, can you carry me? We're going up through there. I'm huffing and puffing going, I need a break. Oh, it was something else. I'm like, there's an elevator. He's like, we can get there quicker with the stairs. I'm like, no, you can get there quicker. And it did. It frightened me a little bit because I couldn't catch a breath. I thought, oh, God, I can't breathe. Am I going to die? And I thought, well, so what if I do? Take control of your fear. When the devil tries to mess with you, put him in his place. If you've got God, you've got what you need. You've got your promises. The devil's a liar. He's really convincing to some people. Don't let him convince you on nothing. He's a liar. We all have our promises, and we're going to get our promises. Here or there, we're going